Hey, so today we will learn about onion architecture. We will learn all the basics, why we need onion architecture. We will also dig into the code. I will show you, with real life example, I will draw a diagram, and then parallelly, I will show you on the Visual Studio how this diagram and the Visual Studio code is related to each other, right? So I'm sure and I promise we will make this session more interesting and not that boring, right? Okay, so let's go ahead. So why we need this onion architecture? So we had, before a lot of architecture like MVC was one of them, 3-tier, N-tier, all of those architecture were there. So these architecture was solving our problems of separation of concern. What does that mean, separation of concern? Separation of concern mean, it was dividing into different layers. So not like in the old time, when you were working with the ASPX applications, you have one page where you see buttons and all. You have to tightly make events on that button click, and then you have to work on. But these architecture were solving those problems. These were dividing all those your problems into different layers, right? You were creating service layer, you were creating this layer, you were creating that layer, all those layers you were creating. Yep. So that was fine. This was solving our that need. But when it comes to loosely coupled, that was not solving this issue. These architecture were quite tightly coupled, and that's why we need onion architecture, right? Okay, so before we jump into actual onion architecture, you must need to know what is that and on what ways we have designed this onion architecture, right? So the base of this architecture is domain driven design. So if you don't know the domain driven design, what it is like, every design is based on domain. Domain means business, right? So all your design that you have to do for your code, that should be business driven, right? Okay, so in domain driven, we also call it domain centric design, because domain is always placed in the center of all the architecture. Okay, so in domain driven design we have two tools. One is strategic design, second is tactics design. So let's learn about that also. These are very important, because if you are an architect or if you are a principal developer in any of your organization, you must need to know before starting any architecture for your application, all these basics. You should not go to code directly and start writing. Otherwise, you are going to miss a lot of things. You should know the history. Okay, so let's back to the topic and let's learn about what is strategic design. So strategic design is something that related to business. Before you land into the code and start preparing all those code architecture, you should think about the business. What is the business need? It doesn't matter how strong you have built the application, how optimized code is written, what are the design patterns you have followed, how strong is your architecture for your platform. But if client is not happy, it is not fulfilling the business needs, that means it is in vain, right? So that is why before jumping into any a technical things, you have to think about the business, right? That is something called strategic design. So next is what? When your strategic design is final, you have to think about architectural diagram, right? Architecture design, and that is something called tactical design. Here you have to choose architecture, programming language, and all, right? So this is what domain driven design. It is more deeper, but since our topic is just to cover onion architecture, so we are covering the base things. Okay, so let's go ahead. Let's start the real fun now. So we landed into the Visual Studio. We have created one solution called demo application, and as promised at the session of this video, that we will create a live diagram, and parallelly we will implement that diagram over here, so we can clearly understand the onion architecture. Okay, so let's go ahead. So this is my paint. I will use this paint tool to draw that diagram. Okay, so this is the domain. Let's use some tool called domain. So this is my domain, and this is your core layer. So there are three cores layer actually, I will show you later, but let's say this is your domain. And what we will do, we will go to Visual Studio. Let's say domain. We will just create a folder parallelly, and you can also, yeah, that is fine. Let's understand this way. So this is your domain. Now let's add other layer for our onion architecture, and that would be your persistent layer. Okay, so let's name it persistent. Right, so this is your persistent layer. Right, so similarly, let's create similarly over here one more folder. We will call it persistent. Right, okay, so let's go ahead and create one more layer. So this is something similar to onion. Like when you start peeling onion, there are layers and layers, right? So this is similar. That's why we are calling it onion. Okay, so next would be your domain service layer. Let's create domain service. So this is your domain service. Perfect. Let's go ahead and go to Visual Studio. Okay, so this is your domain service. Perfect. Okay, so now you should have one layer which called application service layer, or maybe application. You can call it application as well. So let's make it a little bigger to make it a little better. Don't go over my designing skills. I'm not good at design. So let's say application. You can call it application service layer, or you can also call it application layer. It's all up to you. Okay, so let's create over Visual Studio here, new folder, and then we can say application service. Okay, this is also done. Now next would be the last layer of the onion architecture. Okay, so at the very outer side, so there are different layers you can create on the top. So one would be your presentation. So this would be your presentation. Okay, and then you would have other thing. Let's say test. Let's say this is your test layer. Right, so you have test layer as well. Let's make it a little left. Okay, this is cool. And then you would have infrastructure layer. Yes, right, so you would have infrastructure as well. So let's start writing. Okay, so this is your infrastructure. Let's make it a little on the top just to make it readable. Okay, I think it is readable. Right, so let's create test and infrastructure, and let's create test and infrastructure and presentation, all these together. Go to Visual Studio. Let's say add new solution folder and call it presentation. We will talk about all these layers also, what these layers do, right? But first let's focus on creating the folder structure. Okay, so next to your test, so we have test folder, or you can call it tests also, and then we have infrastructure. Okay, so this is our last layer. So okay, so this is good. Okay, so let's fill some color over here, so we can make it cool. Okay, so let's say this is red. One thing, so we missed one thing. We should make a cut over here. We can okay, so we can do this like this. Okay, so let's fill now. So I will say one color for presentation, other color for this. I'm just adding any random color. So okay, so this would be a black. Black won't look good. So this is your domain. Even this is also looking good. It's okay. So this is your persistent layer. This is your domain, and this is your application. Okay, so now let's talk about what each layer do. So presentation layer is your entry point. So in presentation layer, we will store your web API, your Azure function, or maybe your UI. So this is what presentation layer, something responsible for client, that is something called presentation layer. So in this project we have our demo application, which is our web API. So that would be our under presentation. So let's place it under presentation. Okay, so this layer is ready. Okay, so this is presentation layer, this is test. So test is the one, whatever code that you have written for maybe a presentation, maybe application, domain, persistent domain, right? So for all of these layers you can create a test project, right? You can write unit test, you can integration test. So this is one advantage of this onion architecture, that your code is testable. So whatever unit you write, you can make a test for that. Okay, so then is infrastructure. So this infrastructure, this is responsible for calling all the external API, all the third-party API, right? So anything that you wanted to make a call, that class says you need to put here. Okay, let's I will show you with example. So let's create a project over here. Call it. So we will choose class library for .NET Core. Let's say next. Let's name it something, my application name. I will call it demo application dot infrastructure. Okay, so let's create this infrastructure library. Okay, so my layer ready. Now I wanted to make a call to Facebook, right? So let's name it Facebook API. So this is your Facebook API, right? Okay, so this is done. Now maybe you wanted to make another third API call. So let's name it something Google API. Maybe there's a requirement for your project where you wanted to make a call to Google API and wanted to fetch the map, wanted to fetch the longitude and latitude, right? So all of those calls which is third-party API, those needs to be placed inside infrastructure. That is why that is what that is why this is important. This infrastructure layer is. Right. Okay, so let's move forward and learn about next layer. Okay, so test we are good, presentation we are good, infrastructure we are good. Now let's start with application service, right? So your application service is something that is dealing with all the application business logic, right? Because there is sometimes confusion between domain service and application service. That is why I'm saying application service is something related to your application, this business logic. What logic? Whatever business logic that you have to perform just for your application, all of those would be done on the application side, right? Okay. So then next is domain service. So domain service is something that you wanted to perform logic over your database, right? You wanted to make a after fetching some information from the database, you wanted to perform some logic, additional logic. You wanted to make some validation, right? All those sort of logic would come inside domain service. So application related service logics would be application service, database related logics would be inside your domain service. Perfect. Okay, so this is that and now persistent. So some people, in some of the diagrams, if you go over internet, you will see persistent layer is also called infrastructure layer. It is also called repository layer, right? So some people call it repository, some people call it persistent, right? So why we need this layer? So anything which is related to your database, you can set up the context here, you can create a database. So all those things you need to place here inside persistent. Okay, so let's add something here. So so let's say new project. Let's search for SQL project, one of the SQL. Let's go back and let's see. We have this is SQL database project. Yeah. So any project, doesn't matter, but you can choose like for say this application you need. This is your SQL database. Okay, so this is one of your SQL database. Actually, no, you don't need this. Let me remove this. Okay. So let's add one database project. Let's go to SQL, add new project. You can call it here database, right? And this would be your SQL database project. So let's say, this is my application name is demo application, and then you can call it your database. So this is your database project. So this will come into your persistent layer, right? So within that, now you can go ahead and you can start adding tables, you can add starting stored procedures. All of those things needs to be done here. And if you wanted to work with entity framework, you wanted to implement something code first, all those things you can also add, right? And you can also add repository. So this layer is also hold your repository layer. So let's add repository layer. So I would say new project, my class library, I would say next, and let's see, I've copied pasted. No, I didn't. Okay, so I would say my again demo application, and then this would be my repository, right? So this is my repo. Create, it will take few seconds. Okay, it is done. Now what you can do, you can set your DB context here, right? Maybe you can set some repositories here also. Okay, we will dig into the code as well, I mean a little more, but for now let's set up our these folders, folder structure. Okay, so infrastructure is set, persistent is set, presentation is set. Test, for this demo we are not going to write, so we are skipping it, but we understand the value of test, so we need to write unit integration test. Okay, so let's say now domain service, new project again. So this would be again same thing, your class library.NET Core. Next, let's save some time. Repo, instead of repo you will call domain service. Create. I hope it was domain service. Yes, it was domain service. Now in the domain service you can write some of your logic, and that will be calling this infrastructure layer, sorry, this persistent layer. Okay, now let's go to domain. So this is very important, because your whole architecture is based on domain. So domain is that layer which is not dependent on anyone, none of these layers. So it is independent entity. And if you go over here, so this is one of the thing which is in center. So that is why it is also sometimes called domain centric. Perfect. Okay, so let's add here as well. So new project again, same thing. Next, so now we are used to these things, so let's call it domain. Perfect, this is also ready. Now your business logic, so same thing, let's set up this as well. New project, next, and you can call it application service. Perfect. With this, all of your folder structure is ready with your classes, your class libraries. Now we can go and I will show you how they can go, and I will show you how they are linked with each other. Okay, so one of the key thing which is left is that is core. So, and what is that? So what we have to do, application service, domain service, persistent, all these layers we have to move into one, which is core. Okay, so let's go to our diagram, and what we will do, we will we will create one more thing, something like this, and you can name it, let's move it here, yeah, and you can name it something, maybe let's make it black color and say, yeah, black color, and say core. It's not black, but it is okay, so this is your core layer, right? So all these things are under core, and your core and outer side are something presentation, infrastructure, and test. So we will follow the same structure. So let's create a folder called core. You can call it core, you can call it application core, all up to you, but let's follow our what we have drawn. So this is core. Now let's move application service here, domain here, domain service here, and your persistent here. Yeah, so let's just confirm it by diagram. So domain is there, persistent is there, domain service is there, application service is there. Yeah, so this is our now final ready this folder structure, right? Okay. So now let's start writing code, and let's see how these things are making calls from all the layers, right? So what we have to do, we have to set up a database call first. So where we have to do, that is persistent layer. So let's imagine your tables and every stored procedure, everything is ready, right? So let's go here, let's rename it, since this is our repository, what we will do, we will make, let's take an example of person and name it person repo, right? And before, yeah, so there will be another class. I'm not going to add all the code, but let's say there is another class which is your db context. I'm adding this for better clarification. So so here would be your all the db context setup, right? So those things you can do with this class. Perfect. Okay, so this is your person repo, and what it will do, it will make a call to database. So let's create one interface for our repository, so we can make our application loosely couple. New item, interface, and let's say what is the class name. Class name is person repo, so I will say I person repo. Done. Okay, make it public so we can call it outside in the domain service. Okay, so what I have to do, I have to create one model, and I mean entity model, right? So entity model would be the table, similar to table that you have created in your database, right? So where you have to do that, inside domain, because domain is responsible for all the entities. So what you have to say here, let's rename it and say person. You can call it domain, you can call it entity. Let's call it domain for this. So now your person domain is ready, and you can place all these property, person ID, first name, last name, right? So this is my ready now. I wanted to return a person domain when I am able to add my person or maybe save my person, right? So it will take care of all those information. So person domain, add this is ready. Okay, so this is done. Let's implement my interface now for our repository. Okay, so what you have to do, you have to call your context here, right? And you have to say person is still, you know, it needs to get data from a different layer. That will be, let's go to interface. So we should have some data, otherwise how we will save those information, right? So person, and now we have to make this change in our class as well. Yeah, here, otherwise it won't be happy. Okay, so context call, what you will do, context dot whatever the table name, maybe a person, and then you can say add your this person, right? And then I'm not writing the actual code, otherwise this demo is gonna so long. So we are focusing on our main point. So I would say context dot save changes. So this repository would be something like this, these codes, right? And finally you will return whatever that you need, right? You can say I'm returning maybe person. You can return person, you can return anything. Let's say person, let's return person, right? So we can return something that this information is created. Okay, so my repository is good. Now I need to set up my, because who will call this repository? Repository should be called by your, let's see here. So this is your repository, right? Persistent domain service should call it. So now let's go to domain layer, domain service layer actually, right? So this is my domain, and I will say here some of the code I had already written before. This is code. So let's, but delete it. I need my fresh code. Okay, so add, create a class, and this would be your domain service. So I would say person domain service, right? And for sure I need to create one more interface here. So this would be your new item interface, and I person domain service, right? I'm making it these names for better picture, otherwise there will be a lot of confusion. So let's make it public so we can call it outside of this library. And so this will again return your person model. Okay, so domain service needs to call your repository would be persistence project reference, and this would be your repository. Yeah, it is already there, I guess. Yeah, it is already there. right? So it is already calling this one, but it needs to call model as well, right? Because we have to pass model. So let's inject that as well. So this would be your domain. So seems like domain we are also calling, so we are good, right? So inside domain service, let's say what was our person model? Yeah, I wanted to return person model. I need to add a namespace here. Something is missing. Why person model is not coming? We need to see I'm at the right place or not. Yeah, I'm at the right place. Let's investigate that now. So this is my domain service. Let's see project reference. I'm calling domain. I'm calling domain application repository as well, and I need uh, to return this person domain, right? So maybe I'm doing something wrong. Oh yeah, the spells were not right. Okay, my bad. Okay, so let's say using domain, and I wanted to say add person. Good. Okay. So and it will accept for show person model. Done. Okay, so let's implement it. Go back to our person domain service. Right. Implement this interface. Perfect. Okay, so this person domain service will make a call to repository because it has to pass the data to repository, so repository can save data to the database. So we have to make a dependency over repository. So what we will do, we'll make a constructor here because we are going to make a constructor di. So let's find the interface that we need to make a call. So this is my interface, right? So I will say by person repo, and let's say person repo, name it something. Then I have to, yeah, inject that. I mean add namespace here, then declare this. Let's declare this. You have to call it private because I don't want to expose this. The spells are wrong, but no worries, we can fix it anytime. And let's make it read only. Okay, now this would be your private, so let's make it underscore for best code practices. And let's see now, inject it now. Perfect, done. Now I'm going to make a call to my repository, which will give me data after fetching from database context, right? And I will pass this person here, right? So now this layer, any sort of other operation that you wanted to perform, any other, domain logic that you can perform here. Maybe you wanted to validate something, right, on the database before saving that person. You wanted to make a call to another database, sorry, other repository, maybe employer repository, maybe person two repository. So you can fetch, see if this record is valid or not, right? And maybe you wanted to want to perform some post logic as well. So that is why we have this domain service. So whatever logic you want to do implement here, you can come here, you can make a calls, you can perform all those things, but you should not make a direct call from domain service. That is why you have that persistent layer where you need to make a call from context, that in a repository, right? So only domain logic, make sure you are writing only domain logic here, right? Since this is expecting something, and let's say it is sending the same sort of response, so what we can do, we can return the response to make our this domain service happy. With this, domain service is ready. Perfect. Let's go to our application service now. Okay, so application service have to communicate with domain service, right? So first of all, let's make sure that the injection is, sorry, the reference is there or not. Okay, so I see the domain service reference is missing. What we will do first, we will come here. No, I see that. That is right. So I was, looking over here. So domain service is already there. That means we are good. Okay, so again, some dummy code was already there. Let's remove those things. Okay, done. So now what I will do, I will create a class which will call to domain service, and finally data will be pushed. So create a class. So I would say here person application service, right? Okay, I will make it public so I can call it outside this repository, this class library actually, and I need one interface to make my application loosely coupled. new item, interface, and this. So it says person API service.csv. Ah, okay, okay, okay. I didn't add that I guess I missed it. So paste it. This is what happened when you copy paste. Add. Now it should be happy. Perfect. So let's say now I need a DTO because I'm on application layer, right? And application layer is something that is dealing with application logic, and that require a DTO. So let's create another class and say person DTO. And the property what I can do, I can copy from here because my properties are gonna same. No changes in that. So let's do that. Let's make it public. Okay, this is good. And now say let's return person DTO back, whoever is calling, and say add. Right, so this is ready. Let's make it public. Public. So we can expose it outside. Okay, great. So now my service. So what I will do, I have to inject this. Uh, Sorry, I have to implement this interface. Let's cut it and implement this interface. So this is my method. One thing is missing, that is we need TTO. Otherwise, how it will accept the data? So let's person, and then we have to implement this here. Okay, so this is ready now, but this class is still incomplete because this have to communicate with domain service. So we need a domain service, that domain interface to communicate, make a communication. So let's go and find the interface. So this is my interface. Okay, so let's declare it first. Okay, and since I'm going to make it private, so let's make it underscore and say private and read only, and we have to add a namespace. Okay, done. Now I need to pass it di. So what I will do, this and pass this. Dun, dun, dun. Okay, so let's rename this. So what I will do, I will pass it here. Okay, so this is done. Now this class is ready to make a call to our domain service. So this person domain service will make a call to add person, right? And since this is accepting person DTO, but it is accepting domain, and here you have to perform that business logic, right? I'm just taking an example of simple business logic. In applications you would have to add complex logics. Okay, so what I will do, I will say where person model equal to new, and I will say person model. I don't see the reference. I think I have to add that. So let's see the dependencies. Okay, so I see the domain, but I don't see the direct. Let's see. Is it? No, you have to add that. And what you can do, add project reference. You have to say domain directly. Okay, so I think it is happy now. Yeah, so now it should be saying your person model is not accepting. Let's investigate that as well, and let's see what it says. Since this is saying you are making a call through demo application, and this person repo is calling domain. Okay, so domain, right? And this would be your what? I think we are making a spell issue again here. What do I have to say? Let's go to domain, person domain. Oh yeah. So see, this is something we were missing, and now it is done. See, this is a real fun. When you are doing a live demo and there's some issue, you have to investigate like this. Not just live, anywhere. You have to investigate like these. Okay, so this is done. What you can do here, you can say first name, you can read from DTO, you can, assign that first name, last name, and then person, same thing here, just change that property that you need. This would be your last, right? And then you need to pass this. Perfect. And then maybe you can return it from here, whatever the response you are fetching. So this will return you, domain. Again, you have to map that. So like this response, right? And this response you have to, map back, and then you have to pass. So let's save some time. What I will do, I will return just this person DTO for now, right? Or you can return this person as it is. But in actual program, you have to, map it back. So we can send this person DTO. Okay, so till here we are good. Now our all of our applications are communicating with each other except one, and that is what? That is your presentation layer. So this is your web API. So this is your dummy model. What we have to do? We have to, okay, this is our controller. Okay, perfect. So what you have to do? You have to inject that here as well. We already have something. So what you can do? So let's just copy paste, and we have to call our application service here. Let's go to our application service. Okay, this is my, I need an interface to communicate, right? So this would be my interface. Let's name it something. This would be your person application service, right? And we have to for sure inject, but I think, yeah, we still have to add because we don't have that project reference here yet. So uh, inside dependencies, right? Go here, add project reference, and say I need my application service to communicate. And now you can say this one. Okay, done. Now you need to inject this. Okay, so what you will do, copy this, paste this, and yes, this is ready. So let's say you need to make a call to your application service, right? So remove this. Okay, that's fine. Let's copy paste and add a method to save the person. I would say here person DTO, right? And I will say here add or maybe post, right? And here you can say my post. Perfect. And what you will do, you will use this interface to make a call to your service, application service, right? And what you will do, let's accept something. So I would say person DTO person, right? So that's all you have to do. And whatever you wanted to return, you can return okay, return not found, whatever response type. So this is your application ready. With this, we have completed our live demo, right? Our presentation layer is communicating with the application service. Application service layer is calling with domain service. Domain service layer is, communicating with persistence, right? That infrastructure and all, right? And whosoever need this infrastructure layer, where we are making third-party API calls, they can consume it, right? But domain layer has entities model, and domain layer is not dependent on anyone. Just remember that domain is not dependent on anyone, right? Okay, so I hope you enjoyed. That's all for this video. I will see you in the next video.